Life has difficult moments. Those difficult moments can turn into difficult days, weeks, or even seasons. I know over the years you've heard me use the expression storms of life. The reason I use that is because of the season that is involved in a storm and its recovery. I think about storms that come through South Arkansas, where they can carry a powerful punch. The storm itself may last only a brief moment, but it takes days, weeks, or even seasons to deal with the aftermath, to restore power, to get up the trees that have been blown down by the storm, to make repairs to homes that were damaged either by wind or by those trees. It can take a season. We experience these storms in life, something that can take place in just a matter of moments. But because of the hurt, the impact that it has on our lives, we can spend days, weeks, or even seasons dealing with the aftermath of that storm. We're opening our Bibles this morning to the book of Genesis as we continue the story of Joseph. As we look at the life of Joseph, you talk about somebody that has dealt with storms of life. I think about the storms in Genesis 37 that was brought about because of his brother's anger toward him. In chapter 39, he faced a storm when Miss Potiphar made up those false accusations that ultimately landed Joseph in prison. And I think about in Genesis chapter 40, where the cupbearer simply just forgot Joseph. But that season lasted 2 years. 2 years after the cupbearer was released until he finally remembered Joseph. That'll be an important part of our story today. Many of you I know were like me and you grew up watching Bozo the Clown. Bozo was great with his antics, with his jokes, with his skits. Just a lot of fun with that flaming red hair and the blue suit. One of the things that came about as a result of Bozo the Clown was the Bozo Bop Bag. Now this was 46 inches of pure fun. You would take that bag and you'd blow it up and you could sit it on the ground and then you could just take it and you could just hit it and punch it, knock it down. But you know what would happen? It would come right back up. Hit it again. It'd come right back up. Knock it down again. It'd come right back up. Because that's the way that the Bozo Bop Bag was made to work. That every time it was knocked down, it came right back up. I'm told that the secret of that ability for it to come back up after it had been knocked down was a metal plate that was at the bottom of the bag. Weighed about 3 pounds. I think about Joseph. Joseph, who was constantly being knocked down. We have seen that time and again in the story of where he's knocked down, but he bounced right back up. Joseph landed on his feet. There's a proverb, Proverbs chapter 24, verse 16, that I think describes Joseph well. For a righteous man falls 7 times and rises again. Now, that's a good verse for us to remember perhaps when we're going through a difficult storm of life. It has turned into a season of our lives. Remember that proverb. A righteous man falls 7 times and rises again. We need to be a people who bounce back. Again, back to the story of Joseph. One of the things I think that's important, remember in Bozo, the Bop Bag, of where that plate was at the bottom, and that was what helped him bounce back up? I think that was Joseph's faith. Joseph, it's interesting to watch as we go along this story. It seems like Joseph is speaking about God more and more. That it could be that his faith is even growing in the midst of these difficult storms that he just continues to face one after the other. Now look at this. In Genesis chapter 39, Joseph is speaking to Potiphar's wife and he asks this question, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" When we turn to chapter 40, Joseph mentioned God one time in verse 8. Joseph said, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" And he looks at the cupbearer, the baker, and he says, "Tell me your dreams." But then when we get to chapter 41, at the time when Joseph is going to meet Pharaoh, look at the number of times that he mentions God in the conversation. Chapter 41, verse 16, Joseph said, "God will give Pharaoh the answer." Down to verse 25, God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Verse 28, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. And then in verse 32, the reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Man, Joseph just continues to bring up God's name. Now, all of these verses that we looked at in chapter 41 deal with our story of the day, so perhaps it would be good for us to get to the story of Pharaoh's dreams and how God used Joseph in a great way. Pharaoh had two dreams, and he had those dreams, and he told them to his magicians and his wise men, and they had no idea. They had nothing to offer. It's at that point that the cupbearer says, "I need to tell you something. There was someone when you put me in prison that was able to interpret dreams, and perhaps he would be good for us today." And that's when Joseph, 2 years later, was released from prison. Now, when Joseph, he was cleaned up and given a new set of clothes and brought to appear before Pharaoh. At that time, Pharaoh just kind of recapped the situation of where he was about the two dreams and needing to get some interpretation for it. The magicians and the wise men were unable to do that. But Joseph told Pharaoh, God will give Pharaoh the answer. All right, so let's let Pharaoh tell Joseph about his dreams. Genesis 41, verse 17. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me." Pharaoh's dreams, if we could just sum it up, there are 2 dreams, and they're both where 7 bad devour 7 good. Joseph, if he could have just put it in one sentence, he would have said, "Pharaoh, you need to expect 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. There are good days now, but there are difficult days ahead." Genesis chapter 41, verse 29. This is Joseph explaining the interpretation. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. That's Genesis 41, verses 39 through 42. So, the word famine. The word famine was a harsh word in the land of Egypt. Egypt was a country that was established on agriculture. This was a huge part of their lives and of their economics and just their way of living. And so for a civilization that was built on agriculture, in fact, it was their pride. That's how they received this name, the jewel of the Nile. But think about the damage. This is just some ideas of how badly a famine could hurt a country like Egypt. A famine that would last 1 month, it could have some impact on the economy. What if that famine lasted a year? Well, Pharaoh is the one that the people are looking to for an answer, and with no answer after a year of famine, people become disgruntled with the government officials. So it would weaken Pharaoh's authority and power. But what would happen if a famine lasted 7 years? Well, you're looking at the idea and the possibility that the Nile could be reduced to a creek, that crops would dwindle to the point where they would look like twigs. This would be an event, a natural disaster that would impact the economy in a devastating way. And so Egyptians did not like the word famine. They did not want to hear the word famine. Joseph has explained the problem, and now he offers Pharaoh a solution. Chapter 41, verse 33. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. And so Joseph has this great idea. Pharaoh, we need to plan ahead. We need to plan ahead. There needs to be a strong leader put in place to deal with this disaster that is going to be before us. Would need to be someone that could be organized, someone that would be a visionary, because during these 7 years of plenty, it's going to be important, and sometimes it's hard during a time of abundance to think, you mean there are going to be difficult days ahead, but these are good days right now. And so it'd have to be a visionary, an organized person, a strong leader. And one of the things that's interesting is, would people save during that time of plenty? Now, I ask that question more based on today's mindset. If I were to tell someone that difficult days were coming, but if this is a time of plenty, you know what we do is we like to spend in times of plenty. We like to build in times of plenty. So if we start talking about saving and storing, people are sitting there going, hey, I've already thought of 3 different ways to spend all of this abundance, and you want me to save for a rainy day? You see, that's kind of how we look at life today. Wonder what that was like in the time of Joseph and Pharaoh in the land of Egypt. So then there's one big question that comes up. Pharaoh asked him, can we find anyone like this man? One in whom is the Spirit of God. Joseph, that's a great idea. But who will assume that position of leadership? Who is it that is among us that we could use to be this strong, to be this organized, to be this type of visionary, to lead a country through what is bound to be a natural disaster? And then Pharaoh answers his own question in verse 39. Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Wow. you just kind of have to stop and let that statement sink in. Pharaoh looks to Joseph and says, I put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Wow. Man, you talk about someone that has gone from the pit to the palace. Remember the time in the cistern where they've thrown his coat off of him and he's sold into slavery, and now he's in the palace and Pharaoh has just told him that I am putting you over the whole land of Egypt. F.B. Meyer is a scholar and an author, and he makes this great point. He talks about how Joseph, just these different indicators, just to show how far Joseph had come. Man, he had this time when his father rebuked him for a dream that he had. And now Pharaoh was rewarding Joseph for being able to interpret this dream. And so while his father rebuked him, Pharaoh promoted him. Think about his brothers that were selling him into slavery, that they hated him. Their anger was bitter. Their jealousy was strong. But now he is about to be one of the most popular people in Egypt. He is going to be one that literally comes in to save the day. Think about his hands. As a slave and as a prisoner, Joseph was not a stranger to hard work. But now, even with those possible calluses on his hands, here he is in the palace with Pharaoh as royal rings are put on his hands. Think about his feet that at one time had been in shackles and chains. And now he's having royal shoes prepared for him. And then that coat. Actually, there's two coats. There's the first coat, the one that his father gave him, that it caused trouble. Ultimately, his brothers ripped that coat off of him, and they sold their brother into slavery. Then there's the cloak that Joseph had when he was with Potiphar's wife, and when he ran off, she kept the cloak. She used it for evidence as she announced, as she made her case with this false accusation. But now, Joseph was about to wear a royal robe. He definitely has come from the pit to the palace. So what lessons can we learn? What lessons have we learned from looking at just this part of Joseph's life? The first thing I would suggest to you is that prolonged challenges do not have to discourage us. We're given a time marker in verse 46 of chapter 41. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now, the math is easy. In chapter 37, we're told that Joseph was 17 years old. 17 to 30. That was 13 years. 13 long years. And as Joseph went through these difficult times, did he know? Did he have any idea of what God would have in store for him? That as he faced storm after storm and the devastation and the cleanup and having to deal with the problems that came about as a result of whether it's brothers that sold him into slavery, whether it was Potiphar's wife that was making up these trumped up charges, or whether it was the cupbearer who simply forgot him. But Joseph kept his faith. I love this quote from Max Lucado. The path to the palace wasn't quick, and it wasn't painless. But wouldn't you say that God took this mess and made it into something good? Oh, He certainly did. When Joseph was sold into slavery, God used that for something good. When Potiphar's wife made up those false accusations, God used that for good. When the cupbearer forgot Joseph, God was still able to use that for good. And now at this point, we just want to stop and let it soak in and realize the lessons from this time. That you know what? Prolonged difficulties, these storms that just drag out into long seasons, they don't have to discourage us. They did not discourage Joseph. A second lesson. Bad memories don't have to defeat us. It would be real easy for some of us to look at Joseph and say, now Joseph, you need to put those things behind you. The whole conflict with your brothers, just put that behind you. Potiphar's wife, don't worry about it. Just put it behind you. The cupbearer forgetting about you, don't worry about it. But y'all, that's hard. That is hard. Because Joseph had in his mind a view from that cistern of looking up out of that hole. And he would have remembered that. He would have remembered the sound of Mrs. Potiphar's voice as she is announcing of what he did to me. And as she's just in so much anger and so much she's wanting to make her point. And so here she is, continuing to talk about. Did Joseph have that sound and those words etched in his mind? I think probably so. And then those 2 years that he was left in prison when the cupbearer went back into service for Pharaoh, did Joseph remember the smell, that unique smell of prison? Even with those things, the view, the pictures, the sounds, and the smells, those things in his mind, he had to remember that important lesson, that those difficult moments and memories don't have to defeat us. Then there's a third lesson, and we're about to see this one. It's where great blessings need not derail us. That's where Joseph is, and that's where we're going to be interested to watch the story from this day forward. What happens when Joseph is put in this position of leadership with this position of authority? What happens when his brothers show up and they need food? All of those stories are ahead. It is important for us to look and to remember, man, when times are tough, don't give up. When times are tough and you have those memories, don't let that defeat you. But when times start going well, don't let that derail us. You see, I've watched people that have given up on God when times were difficult, but also people that when times were good chose to walk away from God. Didn't feel like they needed God anymore. And so there's an interesting balance there. I like this quote from Oswald Sanders. He says, "Not every man can carry a full cup. The most exacting test of all to survive is prosperity." So he would say, yes, how you handle difficult times, that's an important question, but how you handle prosperity, that may be the big test. So important lessons learned for us is we want to keep that in mind, that these prolonged challenges, they don't have to discourage us. These memories that we have, these bad memories, they don't have to defeat us. But great blessings don't have to derail us. I don't know where you are in life. It may be that you are at a point that you are in one of those storms of life and it's turned into a season. If that's the case, I encourage you to spend time with God. Reach out to us. Give us the opportunity to pray with you, to pray for you, to encourage you in any way we can. If things are good right now, then don't let that derail you from your relationship with God. In fact, you are in a great position right now to be a blessing to someone else. So I hope you'll do that. As we close our lesson this morning, I hope that we will consider where we stand with God. Remember back to that bozo when he kept getting knocked down and he bounced back up? It was that solid foundation, that plate at the bottom of the bag. And for us, the key for us of getting knocked down and getting bounced back up, the key of bouncing back up is going to be how strong is our faith. How strong is our faith? Have you put your faith in Jesus? Have you confessed Him as Lord and Savior, been baptized for the forgiveness of your sins? Or perhaps you have, but in all fairness and honesty, you may be saying, but Johnny, my faith is weak. And my faith is weak and it's not able to provide the foundation to be able to bounce back after facing one of those storms in life. Again, if there is any way that we can help you, there's contact information. that's provided throughout this worship service. And I hope you'll reach out to us, whether online or whether you want to just call us at 870-836-5038. We'd love to help you any way we can. That's 870-836-5038.